Welcome to Becoming Limitless. This is the podcast for entrepreneurs who want to optimize their brain and their body with biohacking. I'm going to teach you how to eliminate brain fog and upgrade your health so you can have more productivity, energy, and growth in your business. I'm your host, Tanessa Shears. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the Becoming Limitless podcast. How has your week been? I hope it's been absolutely fantastic. I have already been back from Panama for a week now, and I can hardly believe how fast it's gone. And if you're tuning in, you're like, what happened? My family actually had this dream about 2 to 3 years ago to start traveling as a family while we're running our businesses. And we had this dream, and it was going to be Panama for 2 months. And we spent over a year planning this trip and visualizing it and trying to see what it would look like and understand the feeling of it. And it happened. We just came back from 2 months as a family in Panama, and wow, what a dream come true. And it was so interesting. I shared a lot about that trip on the stories, and what I was learning along the way and the aha moments that I'd had and how we were teaching the girls to world school and all of this. And it was so fun. And I had a colleague of mine, actually, she reached out to me and she goes, Tanessa, I love what you're doing. I'm interested in what you're doing. You're basically living the life that's on my dream board right now. I have an idea. Can I come on and do a takeover on your podcast and be like a host of your podcast and interview you because you're fresh out of Panama, you're still in the energy of it, and ask you all of the things and the takeaways from your trip to Panama, and specifically Alex Leanne Carter, and she's going to be coming on to, guest takeover host this podcast today. She's going to be interviewing me, and you're going to be getting like a behind the scenes look of what it was like to go and take our two girls who are now 1 and 4 to Panama for 2 months, me and my husband, and live there and work there and relocate our lives, right? You're going to be getting a behind the scenes look of that. And some of the stuffs we are talking about include the biggest shifts that I made. We're going to talk about two of them. Of the many shifts that have happened, I still feel like my life is still settling back into routine. I don't even know if you could call it that. I feel like life right now is in such a stage of redesign. And you're going to hear a little bit about that on the podcast, but you're going to hear some of my biggest shifts. We're going to hear how we decided on 2 months. Like, why choose 2 months? Why not 4? Why not 1 week? Like, why 2 months? And then we're going to talk a lot about the challenges of traveling as a family of four for 2 months, like how the kids adapted. What did you do with car seats? Like, how did you do with travel insurance? Like, a lot of the behind the scenes of what it's actually like and what goes into it. Like, what did you bring for your office setup and a computer setup as a podcaster? Like, what are all those things? And we also get really deep into world schooling. And if you haven't heard that yet, we talk about it a lot, but we are choosing to actually unenroll our kids from the school system when it comes time. And we're talking a lot about the mindset behind that. And my husband and I, we call ourselves crunchy, which if you haven't heard that term before, it's like alternative, holistic, like not following the script of how, we're told to live our lives. And we really kind of unsubscribe from a lot of the common beliefs that are held by most people in society, our family, most people we know. And so you're going to hear a lot of my like really direct and straightforward opinions on all these unlocks we have gone through over the last couple of years. And there's that phrase, right? That you can't see what you can't see. And so we're constantly looking for like, where are our blind spots? What don't we know when it comes to our money, when it comes to our relationship, when it comes to our wealth, when it comes to our health, all of these things. And so this is a really well-rounded podcast, this interview that I do with Alex Leanne Carter. And so I'm excited to share it to you and just really speak on this, what the experience was like of balancing work and full-time travel, and a little sneak peek as to what the next phase of our life is going to look like, because achieving a dream is a really fascinating feeling. And we're going into kind of a little sneak peek of like what is coming in our lives now that we have achieved such a big milestone that we spent years planning towards. So this interview, I hope you'll love it. I'm so curious. I want you to reach out. If you have other questions, like I'm happy to share on Instagram. Reach out to me. I'm at Tanessa Shears. Love to hear from you on there. But don't forget, subscribe to this podcast because I've got lots of great content coming up. I've got a whole kind of re-envisioned imagination for what this podcast is going to be. And I want to just first of all thank you for being part of my podcast community. Like, Honestly, there's community on Facebook and Instagram, but my podcast community is where my heart is. Like, you guys are the real deal. You guys are the action takers. You guys are the vision makers. And so I hope that by delivering you this episode today, you get to just see a little bit about what it looks like to walk such a big vision through to completion. So I hope you guys love this episode. Buckle up. Here we go. And let's jump into the interview.
Well, I get to be the takeover host, I guess you want to call it, for the Limitless podcast today. And I'm excited because Tanessa just got back from her 8 weeks in Panama. And, while she was away, I don't go on Instagram often, but I would say in the last 8 weeks, I have been a lot more intentional because I've been wanting to see what Tanessa and her family are up to. Tanessa and I have children who are pretty similar. What's really cool is Tanessa and I actually grew up pretty close to each other. We didn't know each other growing up, but I think we have some like common friends and things like that when we talked about it. And we actually got together a few summers ago, and we'll get together this summer. Like our families have grown since then, and it's just been so fun watching Tanessa create what she's creating with her business and her family and her kids, because there's so much alignment with the vision that I have for my family and my children. And I think the first message I said to Tanessa a few weeks ago was, you have no idea what I put on my vision board this year. And you're literally creating what it is that I I am looking at creating for my kids. And so I do have a list of questions, like some more specifics to unpack. And also I'd love to just start off to be like, okay, you're now home. Like, how are you feeling now after that you're home? You've been away for 8 weeks. And I'm curious, like, I think my biggest curiosity is, you have the plan before you go, and now you went away. And is that still the same plan, or are things going to be shifting a little bit now that you've experienced and had that reality of being in Panama and living life like that?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, we got back at 10:30 PM at night by the time we rolled into our house, and we woke up the next morning and went grocery shopping because we had nothing in the house, and we are in the Costco parking lot in our 3 layers and our rain jackets, and it's so cold that it's stinging, and it's raining, and there's traffic, and things are expensive here, and I literally looked at my husband, I was like, "Why do we live here again in this weather?" Like, there has been, like, I gotta tell you, and I love data from the Aura Ring, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, my heart rate variability," which is like my body's stress measure, it's suppressed all week. It must be due to the lack of sunshine. Like, I definitely feel the shift, and I gotta tell you, but right before we left, I was like, 8 weeks is too long. What are we doing? This is a terrible idea. I don't know why I thought, I'm gonna get homesick. Who plans a first trip for 8 weeks? Like, don't you start at like 3 weeks or something rational? And I was freaking out the whole time on the way to the airport. My stomach was a mess. And I think it was the first day my feet landed in the sand there. And I said, 2 months is not enough. 2 months is not enough. So, as to the question of like, is the dream changing already? Yeah, we thought we had a good idea of what it was gonna be, but, like, there's this weird thing that happens when you experience, like, a dream like that coming true, like, something that we didn't even have in the awareness to put on a vision board 3 years ago. It wasn't even a thing that I knew about. To have completed that was such a, like, like, it was amazing, but there's this, like, what's next? Like, this almost like, I have been running towards this for years, 3 or 4 years. And now we gotta figure out what's next. I know we'll probably get into it later, but we've found our next. We have found our next. It hit us out of nowhere, but it's good to be back. I love seeing the family. I hate the weather here. It's not 30 degrees and sunny every day like it was in Panama.
Well, yeah, and you came back like in the winter. I mean, you were gone during January, February, and came back in March. And yeah, Vancouver is a bit of a rainy place to be in. I got to live a year over in the Caribbean. Luckily, I came back in the summer, so it wasn't until winter hit, like several months later, that it hit me, and I actually went back for 2 months because I was like, oh my goodness, right? But yeah, when you have that exposure and you experience that, like, I guess I'm really curious for you. Like, did you notice just like perspective shifts, just being there and living that kind of lifestyle, and then coming back to, the hustle and bustle of Vancouver, and even as you notice, like with your Aura Ring, like how, like with your stress, like Just curious in terms of that, and just evaluating maybe other things or things that you experienced you didn't anticipate experiencing upon your return.
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest one was like I'm in Vancouver, so we're on Pacific time. When you go to Panama, it's Eastern time. So my whole day got pushed back 3 hours in terms of my community calls and some of my client calls. So my earliest start day was now at 11:15, and the
Mm,
rest of my days were starting at 1 or 2. And I intentionally kept it that way. And the biggest thing I started realizing right away was like, life is different when you're not rushing. Because we had this experience like when
mhm,
I was either working at 6 a.m. or 8 a.m. Those were my two start times. And it was just like this like dive right into work. And I was like, it's okay because I have little kids and this is when I'm most productive and I'm most awake here. But I didn't really fully realize that like that slowness was something that was way more in line with my values. And I
mm,
it was in those mornings, like I would get up every morning at about 5:30. I'd be at the gym at 6. Now picture this gym in this building, the first building we stayed in, the entire one wall was windows and it was east facing. And I watched the sun come up over the ocean while I was warming up on the treadmill every morning and just the sun. And then I'd go do my workout and then I'd go sit outside and I'd do yoga or write or meditate. And this was like something I had never done before. But this experience of just like, and I get back when I get back, my husband then takes his turn and goes out. But I recognize that like the rush that I had cultivated in my North American lifestyle had stolen all my joy and stolen a lot of my
mm.
peace and my ability to feel like grounded in this moment and to not feel like I was just doing one thing to get to the next. Like wiping everything off the calendar in the morning was just magnificent. And so like that was a profound, profound shift. And then we had a couple of other things that really changed. Like I've recognized how much movement has created a bonding connection with our family. So we would get
Mm,
up in the morning, like and we would go for a 2 to 3 hour beach walk from about 9 to 11:30 or noon every day. Or we'd go in the swimming pool. And it was just, I realized that our family connects through walking because it
mm.
is time completely unplugged. We spent 2 to 3 hours a day for 2 months talking about what's next. Where's life going? What do we want to achieve? What do we want to feel? Are we happy with things? What do we want for our kids? Like to get that much uninterrupted time,
Yeah.
feet grounded in the sand, like sun on our skin. It was such a cool way to be able to just experience life the way I think I always wanted it. And it was interesting. I was flipping back through my journal and I had found an entry from February of 2023. So exactly a year ago. And my husband had sat down with me and we had written out like, what is our ideal day? And we wrote it out and it never happened. But the weird thing is our life in Panama was that exact routine.
Wow.
It was everything from like the work was from 12 to 4. Like I didn't work less in Panama. I just shifted it all. And it was absolutely fantastic to see. I was like, we're doing our dream day right now. We got to take this back to Vancouver. So those I think
Yeah.
were two of the really big perspective shifts was just like rush had stolen so much of the joy out of my life and I'm not doing that anymore and that walking time was the time that we create a lot of that growth within our marriage and our family.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I mean, I'm just picturing you guys walking across the beach, and it's funny because like my husband and I have been able to incorporate more walking, and I know that's something that you guys do so much with your family too. And but that expansion, right? Like not just, a 30-minute walk, but really like 2 to 2.5, 3 hours of connected time, uninterrupted. I imagine the girls are running ahead, like in the water and everything about that. So we'll speak about the girls, like I've done this a lot by myself, but what does it look like now when you've got two daughters like doing this with you? Like I'm curious to just I've got a couple more technical questions around that, but yeah, tell me more about that with the girls and their adjustments and for them to be part of this like this adventure.
Yeah, well, and I want to preface this by saying that like as dreamy as this all sounds, there were really hard moments. Like, we have no help with the kids, which means it is me, my husband, and 2 girls. One of them, I mean, Tenley is right now, she's 21 months. So she's got words. She can string 2 words together, but she can't communicate. So she's in that phase of being really frustrated. and, crying and a lot of temper tantrums. And she doesn't like to walk for 2, 3 hours, go figure. So we have to do a lot of carrying. So I do want to just make sure, like, as there were really hard parts about it. And then all on top of it, like all of us being in what would be considered a much smaller environment than we're in right now. But I was actually surprised how well we all thrived. Um, and I realized we really like being around each other, which is
Mhm.
interesting because that could have gone either way. But like one of the biggest things that Flynn and I noticed at least was having to be the full-time care. Like, so, most people get school for their kids, or they'll get daycare, or they get grandparents pop in or stuff like that. But to take on that for 2 extended months, it was a lot. But as far as the girls, like they loved it. Like mom and dad are around all the time, right? And I think for them, it was hearing a different language, I think, for one, is really important. And I know my husband's family speaks Tagalog, he's Filipino, but like meeting people that speak a different language and being encouraged to speak. So like we'd ask her if she knew gracias and she knew por favor, and like she knows their basic words, but having to learn, and that's why we're a really big fan, and I know we've talked about this, of entering this whole world of world schooling. So there's the traditional school system that we all know, and then there's homeschooling, which is the traditional home school system done at home. But world schooling in general is when you unenroll from the entire system and you educate the way you want to do it. And so we like the amount of animals that we found on the beach. We watched chicken lay eggs. She practiced a new language. Like she learns how to swim. Like there's so much skill that doesn't need to be taught through a classroom, but can be taught through life experience, right? And we want her to experience cultures around the world and understand how different people do life. And so this world schooling adventure, I mean, we're still super new into it, but wanting to do that. And then plans in the future is I do want to be in the position to hire either, like, this is big dream, a nanny to come with us, not so that we don't spend time with the kids, but so that there is someone there to continue on their education and also to make sure that Flynn and I get a break. Because if we're going to be traveling long term, you need a little bit of a break. You need adult time where there's not kids all the time. But that's the vision for future trips.
Well, and I was curious about that, right? Like we actually live, I mean, it is Andrew and I with the 2 girls here, and Abigail does go to a preschool right now, and that has been a question of like, what does your day look like in terms of being able to work, being able to have that quality family time, and the world schooling piece, so that yeah, I guess every like the schooling piece is fulfilled and also the work piece so that you obviously can continue to create this.
Yeah, well, the with the world schooling piece, like we're planning, I'd love to be able to bring someone in, right? Because I really think that different people teach things different ways. Um, but it was quite a journey in terms of like understanding how to make it all work, how to be together and how to function as a family, right? Because when you're in each other's space all the time and there's no separation, like it's for Flynn and I, we had to be very conscious to take solo time.
Mm,
Meaning like, I'm gonna sit out on that lawn chair over there and you take the kids. But in terms of like what made it work really well was in 2022 when Tenley was born, that's the youngest, Flynn quit his full-time job, right? And he has obviously a videography business and stuff, but that's not a business that thrives on vacation.
for
So
sure,
it
yeah.
it has worked really well, in which I'm still able to work about 20 hours a week and he steps in. So it was a negotiation between the two of us of like him being able to provide that support while I'm able to work so that we can travel, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
part of what funds the travel, but
So
definitely.
that's kind of what you, because you, I heard you say earlier, like you did still work. So you were still working about 20 hours a
Yeah.
week.
Same as at home. Nothing changed. I worked the same days a week. The times were just shifted. Yeah.
And now
It
that you're
was
back, you're looking at shifting.
now that I'm back, well, I don't start work until the afternoon now, which has been a weird shift. The days feel so long. But yeah, I'm already looking at like for this next phase, how does business need to look? How does life need to look to fit that? Right? Because there's questions we're starting to ask now too of like when the girls get older and we want to go to Asia, what am I going to do with my clients if I am on a
Mm,
15-hour, 12-hour time difference, right? And so we're having to negotiate like it's a cool question when you ask yourself like if I
sure.
take out this piece, how can my clients get better results? Like those are cool questions you get to ask yourself. It's just it's very a weird experience when you ask yourself what would you do with your time if you wiped everything off the board? Like if money wasn't an issue, if obligation wasn't an issue, if anything, like what would you actually want to spend your time doing? And then not accepting your first answer and your first answer being, I want to spend time with the kids. I want to work out more. Like really, what do you want to experience with your life? It's unsettling. It's a big question to ask. Like it's really
Yeah.
like and to have those answers not be influenced by somebody else's life. I
Mhm.
saw her do this, I saw them do that. That looks fun because I chased that. In my business, I chased the business coaches that told me $30,000 months. That's where it's at. Here's what you need to do to get that. And after a while, I was like, why do I want $30,000 months? For what? Like, it doesn't even make any sense. And so it's like when you really start to look at like, wipe everybody's ideas off the board. What do I want? Like, it's a little scary. We're going through that again right now, and it's not fun, but I know from experience that getting to the other side of these, identity shakeups, straight up, that's what they are, identity shakeups, like, how great things have been on the other side because we were willing to go through kind of the middle of that transition.
Well, it's like that's the 7 layer question I always ask clients, like the 7 layer why, but you're kind of questioning yourself, not necessarily the why, but just going 7 layers deep on what does it look like? Because you're right, a lot of times the automatic is just like that service level, but really to sit there and to connect with like what's important to you, right? What are your values? Like, how do you want to live your life and experience your life? Like, I'm always like, you've got life to live, might as well live it to the fullest, right? And
Right?
so, what you define as that is the fullest. And I love because I feel like in the last year or so, on your journey, and I know I started a little bit sooner, but you've really been unpacking that. And I think it's so powerful when you can release what everybody else, what you feel like all the expectations are around you, and you can truly connect with really what's important to you and what lights you up and the vision you have for your family. And so I love how you have, just got on the same page there to create that for your family and you're embracing it. Like that's what you know, you had the 8 week and then you're just open. And that's so powerful. Like I know on a neuroscience level, right? Like on a neuroscience level, things shift when you're open to possibility versus when you allow your brain to that automatic response of like what you're seeing around you and just leaning like you're talking about, like leaning to curiosity and just being
Yeah.
open to, yeah, what else is next, right?
Right? Well, and that's one thing that we're really big on right now is what do I need to know that I don't know right now? Because
Mm,
if you look around for how to set your goals, like we are talking about, you're going to set them based on what you see other people doing and what you know. I want to figure out what I don't know. And we've
mhm.
asked, we have friends that are entrepreneurs, that are investors, and we would say to them, like, what are you doing with your life? What are you doing with your time? Like in these elevated circles when and this is like my clients laugh at me. They told me I've gone to woo-woo Tanessa now and I've gone down the rabbit hole with all my sound baths, but they get a good giggle out of it. Like I have really stepped into this like field of entrepreneurial consciousness
Yeah.
and energies and being yeah, just quantum energies, consciousness, like how what we invite in is what we send out. And like that's what we were I've been digging into that. And I'm like, I want to invite in something I don't know that's gonna blow my mind because that's what happened with this whole passive income life that we have is like that was not even something we knew to set as a goal. And that's what I think we should be asking. It's not like,
Yeah.
how can I get 3 workouts per weekend? It's like, what am I not seeing? And I think that's the point of being connected and around people who think differently than you do,
Sure.
is
Yeah.
because what we're diving into now is like something that has been there, but we weren't ready for it. And when it was dropped in our laps, like we didn't that Flynn and I were up till like 11. I know this doesn't sound crazy, but we sleep at 9. It was crazy. We were up till 11 the other night, just vision casting like this will be wild when this happens and this will be wild when this happens. It's because we've had this whole unlock happen where we didn't know this entire realm existed in terms of like what people do and can do and things you can do with your life. And so that's the question I think to ask is it's not what goal do I set, it's what don't I know that I need to find
Yeah.
out. And that happened I think when we've been connecting and when you heard my story about the passive income and you're like, that's what I didn't know.
Yeah. 'Cause I put the and I love this because I mean, of course, me being with the neuroscience, right, and I looking at, like, the reticular activating system, right? Like, I had it I finally put it out there. Like, I've been thinking about it, was in my head, but once I made it more, like, official, like, on paper, and I swear it was, like, I wanna say it was, like, the next day. It's like the next day I'm on I went on Instagram, something to do with the podcast, and there you were in your stories, and I was like, "Oh, what's Tanessa up to?" And I kinda seen that you talking about Panama, but I hadn't really been following as closely until I was like, "Okay, so this is what's happening." And then I was like, "Okay, I would love to do this podcast with you." And then you sent me a couple episodes to listen to, and I'm like, "Okay, now all these light bulb moments are happening because it was the reticular activating system activated and all of this stuff was coming to me." And it started off with a question. It started off with me being curious of like, what does this look like? And how do individuals like those individuals for there, like how are they creating that? Like what is right? Like what are they thinking and what are the actions that they're taking and what decisions are they making to generate that? And it was just kind of challenging the status quo of like being open to there's gotta, there's other possibilities and what you can create. So what I'm really curious to in terms of your journey, I know you did the 8 weeks. You've talked about traveling 4 months out of the year. Perhaps that's changed now. Where did that original kind of stem from? Because I know that you're a data girl. Like I know that there's always data behind your decision. So I'm curious to know like where the 8 weeks came from, what that thought with the 4 months of the year came from, if there was any kind of calculations behind that.
Yeah, so the where we really started to get the idea is the people that we learned how to do this whole passive investing thing from. They were from Montreal and they became expats and moved to Panama, right? And so we
Mhm.
were like, "Oh, well, I mean, we have people with boots on the ground that can tell us like safe places to be with 2 little girls. Like, they are so familiar with the area. They'll be like, "This building is good. Don't go in that, Airbnb building." Like, it was really comforting to know that. And
Mhm.
so, when we originally had started out, we're like, "Let's do, like, 4 weeks or 6 weeks." And then we were kinda like, "Okay, well, hey, family, mom, dad, my sister, and my brother-in-law, do you guys wanna come with us to Panama?" And, like, because my birthday was January 31st, my oldest is February 8th, like, "Do you wanna come to Panama for our birthdays? Wouldn't that be fun?" And they're like, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's go to Panama for your birthday." And I was like, "Great, then we'll make it 8 weeks. So we'll be there for 3 weeks, you guys will be there for a
Mhm.
week or 2, and then we'll have some time on the end. I won't get homesick. My kids will see their grandparents. It'll be great." And then, like, a month before we left, everybody I almost said lovingly bailed on us. My mom and dad were like, I don't wanna go there." My sister's like, "We're going on a trip in May." And that's where I was like, "This is too long. I've never been away from home this long. I can't be without family." I was so anxious about this idea of being away from home that long. So, it wasn't I had said to my mom, I was a little peeved. I was like, I wouldn't have chosen 2 months if I knew we were gonna have any, like, family coming to visit or anything, but it was a blessing in disguise, and I remember when we were there, Flynn and I were like, "Oh, I'm glad we did 2 months." Like, I am so glad we did 2 months, and then so we just figured, why don't we do 2 two-month trips a year? Like, that feels
Mhm.
doable, right? Like,
Okay.
getaway, we were gonna do a month or 2 somewhere, we're gonna explore while the girls are small, explore Canada in the summer and explore somewhere else in the winter, but coming back now, what we're looking at is we've got a month in September planned, and then we're ready to kick it into high gear. We're already thinking of our next January trip is going to be 10 to 12 weeks. And it's
Ooh.
gonna be we're currently or tentatively planning we're gonna do a full, northwest is it west? Northwest tour of Dominican Republic, the
Oh,
entire
cool.
coast. Yeah, and we've
Wow.
got all these, like, health-oriented surf towns that we wanna stay in and stuff like that, so that's the plan, and then we might even just do like, 2 to 3 months in Spain in the fall, like, we're now looking at, like, 6 months a year, and it's like we've been bit really hard with the travel bug. There's too many places in the world to go right now.
Well, that was something else I was thinking, like, with your daughters as they get older, would you foresee staying, like, longer periods and places to even though you're doing the world schooling, like or, I mean, have you even thought about, like, how long or I guess, yeah, the questions of sort of the schooling of the world schooling would you consider having them enroll in like a more traditional type of high school at a certain point? Like, I'm just really, really
Yeah.
curious of like what that is. I mean, I have a background in education, right? Former life was as an educator, and I taught international schools globally. So taught in mostly international schools, right? And so there's that, and then which isn't different, right? Like, which is a different schooling and things like that. So I guess I'm just curious if there's, or really you're just taking one step at a time. I guess I'm just
Well,
gonna
you know,
see
the
like
interesting thing
how
is
far is, yeah.
so the whole passive income investing thing, like, we learned that off a YouTube channel. We had such success with it that they interviewed us on their channel. That's how we met the owners of the channel. And that's we went to Panama. We hung out with them a bunch of times. Like they're great friends. Um, it's just funny how the world works like that.
Yeah.
But um, oh, where was I going with this? What was the question again?
I
I
think it was
confused.
like, have you like in terms of the like looking at combining world schooling with
Yes,
like say
yes,
international schools,
yes.
like that was just kind of, yeah, I was curious about
Yeah.
that.
So through this interview that we did with them, we have met many, many people naturally, right? Because they're
Yeah.
reaching out to us. And so we have had dinner with, I think, 2 or 3 couples in Vancouver alone that we have
Oh,
met through that
cool.
interview that we did on that channel. And one of the couples, the couple that actually taught us world schooling was a thing. This was another unlock. They're like, yeah, BC, British Columbia is one of the best for unenrolling. Like it's one of the easiest
Yeah.
places in the world to unenroll your kids. Like a lot of places make it very difficult. And so
Mm.
we were like, "Oh," and their kids are, oh, I wanna say their oldest is like 15 and their youngest is like 12. They're older, they're like in teens.
Yeah.
And they were telling me that they're kind of hitting this part because they've had this whole lifestyle of traveling. And they're like, oh, well, our kids now want to start staying with their friends and they want to start going into school. And so they were negotiating that at that point, and they weren't sure if they just were going to travel with one of their kids and the other one is going to stay with grandparents. But it's interesting to watch all the different things. And for me, like if my kids ever want to do something that requires university, like they want to be a doctor and that requires them going through university, they're gonna have to get into the school system at some point, right?
Right.
But I think I wanna allow them to really make that decision for themselves. Like,
Yeah.
ask them at grade 8 age, "Hey, what are you interested in right now? Could you wanna do another year of world schooling?" "Yeah." "Okay, grade 9," right? And obviously, there's gonna be some onus on us to be able to keep them up and be able to enter the school system at that point. But I think, like, I don't think there will ever come a point unless they choose that route that we will enroll them in a school system because Flynn and I are like super crunchy and we just like how do I say this? Looking out at how the world has changed over the last few years, I don't want other people's opinions raising my kids.
Mm.
Meaning, like, I wanna know that my values are being instilled in my kids, and if I can't spend the majority of that time with them, that's for me. I mean, like, I'm sure there are a lot of wonderful educators out there, and it's not to do with the teachers, it's to do with the system.
Sure.
It's the
Yeah.
system is like, this is what you need to know, and this is I mean, if we even just zoom out and look at our healthcare system, like, there's talks right now in Canada, one of the parties that's running politically is paying for people's prescriptions. Like, rewarding not
Yeah.
taking care of our health instead of rewarding health. And so it's just like there's so much that we fundamentally don't agree with that is imposed on us from messaging to how to take care of your health to staying in the system to getting a job to buying a house to being a property owner to retiring when you're 65. Like we've unsubscribed from all of that. We take care of our health. We sold our house. We enrolled our kids. We retired at 33. Like I just feel like we would be a large disruption if we ever got put in a public school system.
You make me laugh because I love it. I love all of this stuff. And it's funny because I know Abby's a little bit younger. And I mean, she does like go to like the little preschool, and the educator in me was like looking at all of the things, like interviewed like crazy. And ultimately, because of her age, she goes to play. She loves playing. It's a place that they spend a lot of time outdoors because she loves being outdoors, and that's what she gets to do, right? And so she's in preschool. Right. And like when she gets older, and I think I jokingly said to a girlfriend the other day, I was like, I don't think that there's a school in Calgary for Abby, like because she's just the way she is, like the thinker that she is, and very hands on. And so it's funny because it's like I have had that question of like where would I send Abigail to school, right? Like, so because I mean, and I've been in it, I've been in the system, and my role was to shift it to, in innovation, bring in so much more hands-on learning and exploration and more the entrepreneur style. And I can say that, sure, you have some great educators out there, and then you have a long system, right?
Yeah.
That, it takes time. And so our kids are young now and they're entering it now. And it goes back to the question of, like, as you said earlier, right? You don't know what you don't know. And as you're having conversations with people,
Mm.
and I know homeschooling is blowing up like crazy. And it is very common in the expat communities because of the global opportunities and where you're able to learn and experience that you're just not going to learn on the other side of four walls, right? Like, it's really
Right.
being out there and the experiential learning. Like, that's what it is, right? It's like the outdoor classroom essentially around the world, which is just so exciting because it's not just, learning through a screen or on books. You're actually getting to physically experience it, which, as I do, like that sensation, that emotion that you get to that you experience when you experience something is powerful and is so much more impactful, right? So,
Right. Yeah, no,
um
I was just gonna add too that, like, it's interesting as you ascend through these levels of freedom in your life, like, as entrepreneurs while listening to this, we have gotten our schedule freedom back. Even though we spend all this time in our business, we're not working for someone else's 9 to 5 anymore, right?
yeah.
We get through these levels of freedom, and all of a sudden, have you noticed, like, every time you unlock a level of freedom or a new way of seeing the world, all of a sudden, it becomes very apparent how many people don't see what they can't
Mhm.
see. And it's
Sure,
not
yeah.
my job to educate, I mean, with family, we share, but it's never our responsibility to like educate other people on this. But like we've had so many unlocks now, is I think that's where our biggest issue lies with more of a school system is like I can see so many realities right now and truths about things and like how I want my even just emotional intelligence
Yeah.
that my kids that like people don't cause your feelings, you cause them with your thinking. Like
Yeah.
even those type of things that for me just like I feel like being in a school system type of environment, you're around people that don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And it's like, I want my kids to be around people who are expanding them beyond what we are capable of. And I just don't think that's in any type of system, right? Even when it comes to our health, anything, any type of
Yeah.
system, like I want to be around expander people who are doing better and more above where we are because that's where you grow, right? I want my kids to do better than I can. And I need to put them in environments where that's
Mhm.
possible for them.
Well, you have me think of that saying, right? You are the sum of the five people you spend most of your time with, right? And so when you think about that, the conversations that you're having, the questions that you're asking, like, that's really going to in what, as you said earlier, it's like it does influence in a way, but you can be so much more expansive if you're surrounding yourself with those that are thinking more expansive, that want to challenge the status quo, that want to look at things differently, really stepping into 100% as possible 100% of the time, starting with possibility, not with the automated thought pattern of like what society has set up until now, right? Like, you get to, the thought of, you are the thought, your thoughts create your reality, and you're the creator
Yeah.
of your thoughts. You get to totally shift all that. So there were, okay, kind of talked about that. Uh, okay, here was a big thing for me. I was really curious. So, because when I have lived overseas, I have lived overseas and I've gone somewhere. So, in terms of like bring office and things that I would need to, yeah, have my office abroad, um, well, a lot of times things were provided for me. So I was really curious for yourself. When I think about, we've got the podcast mics and the stands and those kind of things. Like, sure, can kind of think minimalist, but I was really curious to know for you and your setup, like what were the things that you traveled with to set yourself up for success so you could still continue to work in the space and environment that you were in.
This was a huge learning space for me in this. I brought way too much stuff. Like, I bought more work-oriented stuff than I did, like, clothes, practically. Like, keep in mind, like, I'm used to working in an office with a stand-sit desk. I have an ergonomic setup. I have a 34-inch curved monitor. I have, like, the works. Like, it is set up for good posture here. Like, so and I hate working on a laptop. I always have because you can't have good posture working on a laptop because you're either looking down at it and it bugs your neck, or you put it up and then your hands are way up in the air on the keyboard, right? Like it's very hard. So I actually brought my laptop and I brought my Mac Mini with a US or an HDMI cord with the intention of plugging it into the TVs there so I could have a larger screen. I brought my Magic Keyboard, I brought my Magic Mouse, I brought my speaker system. Well, and keep in mind, I brought two full computers. My husband brought his computer. Like, what else did I bring? Like, I brought stuff. We bought a like they're called a DJI mic set. They're those clip-on little square mics you see everyone wearing now. And I'm gonna tell you, I laugh. I was like, why did I bring all that stuff? Like, so here's what I used. I used my laptop and my Magic Keyboard and my Magic Mouse, and then the only other thing I brought my webcam because it's super small and portable. And the only other thing that I think was the best investment, my husband and I made this purchase right before we left, was instead of bringing my big podcast mic, I brought those little DJI mics, and there's two of them and they're wireless and it's absolutely fantastic. I did about 7 podcast interviews while I was away, and 4 of them said to me, "Your sound quality is exceptional. What are you using?" And I was like,
Wow.
that was cheaper than my Yeti mic. Like, so when I go again next time, all it's going to be is my MacBook Air, my keyboard, my mouse, my webcam, and then the little wireless mics. That's it. Way more minimal.
I already know what's going on my next shopping list.
Yeah, no, those things are awesome. And they're great because the reason we bought them actually is because they plug into your phone as well. They go on top of
Oh,
my husband's
nice.
camera, and keep in mind he's a videographer, so it works for his business. They clip on to my shirt whenever I'm doing podcast interviews. They plug in and they plug into my iPhone.
No,
So
that's
like
amazing.
it makes the sound quality exceptional when I use them. It's great. It's great.
Love that. Well, because like that's I've often I'll always usually myself always do recordings before I go travel because I'm like, well, I don't really want to bring like my full setup and my Yeti mic and everything with me. So I love knowing that now there's a great, more travel friendly microphone for podcast recording. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna. I have seen more and more of the use of them, so I'm looking forward to looking at that.
Yeah.
So here is a this is a big discussion that Andrew and I've had like when we've had this chat about taking the girls overseas and having extended periods of time. And you actually kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, and it was about, sort of travel insurance and just medical care, essentially, right? Now, I know when you go on smaller trips, you could get, travel insurance for the 8 weeks. However, like if you're there longer, like I'm just really curious in terms of like that kind of piece in terms of just the medical piece and right because we've got young children and I mean I don't like Abby is quite a climber and she's quite very adventurous and you just don't know with kids and as an individual I didn't really think about that when I traveled but I was really glad that he thought about that when you've got young kids to just think about like yeah if injuries happen or something like that that you have I guess, yeah, the medical insurance to cover it, and that you've also got access to that kind of care for the kids, and then I guess for ourselves too. I guess we never know what can happen.
Right. Well, we went back and forth on this for a while because we have credit cards that we pay a fee on every year, and they actually would have covered all of us for our entire trip. We have like a World Elite Mastercard, and we actually you ended up using that Mastercard to cover large parts of our rental car um
Mm,
insurance. They don't cover the liability, but they cover like the damage and stuff like that, and that saved us hundreds of dollars in there alone. So we were looking at the medical insurance that is provided by the credit cards, and it was like it was $1 million, and it was like, yeah, that's probably going to be fine. But we just wanted a bit more. So we actually went with a company here called To Go. Like it's you can go into any insurance agency and buy it, but they were fantastic. We really liked them. The reason we chose them is it was 5 million per person,
mm,
which I mean covers a lot more because when you go into some remote countries like in Panama, the main hospitals in Panama City, we were about 2 hours and 45 minutes outside of that, which means you're going to need a helicopter evacuation. You need a bit of a bigger budget for that kind of stuff, right? And in a lot of these countries, you're going to like the hospitals are in the big central cities and you are just have clinics and stuff like that. So you want to make sure that you have that. So we actually chose To Go. We went through them. And I think we paid 300 for all 4 of us for 2 months, which I didn't think was unreasonable, right? So we got that. And then Yeah, I think that's what we got. The other option we were considering, a lot of influencers on the YouTube travel space talk about it's called Safety Wing. Safety Wing, I think it is, and it's digital nomad insurance that you renew on a month to month
Oh.
basis, and it was way cheaper. It was like $45 per person for a month. It was way cheaper, but I think it only covered like 250,000 or 500,000 or something like that. So we were really just looking at like peace of mind. That we pay for peace of mind in
Sure.
this house. We pay for peace of mind. So
Yeah. Well, I mean that's helpful, right? To know different options, and even just the fact that you talked about being mindful of like your distance of where you are to a hospital and clinics and things like that. Yeah, like you said, I love that. You're like, it's peace of mind. Now you talked about cars. So you
Mhm.
did end up renting a car for the time that you were in Panama.
Yeah, that was a wild experience. So we knew going down that it was going to be really expensive. I think we rented a car for 3 days in Panama City, and I think it cost us like $370. Like wild. A lot of these countries, like the car rentals are very cheap, and that's what they advertise online. But then you get there and it's the insurances that are like three
Oh.
times the fees, and you don't know that till you get there. So one of the best things that we did for Panama is we went and joined Facebook groups. So there was one that we joined called I Go Panama, and it was fantastic because right before we left, the entire country of Panama was rioting to the point where there were so many riots and protests that there was food not being delivered to much of the country, gas not being delivered to much of the country. And so these groups kept us kind of abreast of what was going on, like people there. And so that group was wonderful. And even for like things like how we get from place to place and stuff like that, like people that are there that know the services, and you're not just online looking at random reviews. You're in these groups long enough, you see the people that comment. So we're doing that right now. We just joined a bunch of Dominican groups for the areas we're staying in, and you get, insider tips on things. And so we did do a rental in Panama City that was very expensive. And then we actually found, this is through our friends that live there. There's a private shuttle company, and we just
Mm.
paid for them. So they would get one of those giant Sprinter vans. They'd pull up, full AC, cooler stocked with drinks, nice cushy seats, and we would ride for 2-3 hours from city to city. But like that was another thing, is we were just willing to invest in that private shuttle because we wanted safety, because that's the thing we didn't know is car seats aren't a thing in a lot of countries in the world the way they are in Canada. And we lugged our car seats down to Panama, not knowing that most taxis don't have seatbelts in the back. So there is no way to attach your car seats. Like latch car seat things aren't a thing either. And it's funny because my husband is laughing. He's like, I'm from the Philippines. Like we put babies on the back of motorcycles there. Like he's like giggling at us, but we really had to like, it was this such a weird thing of like sometimes having to take the cab in the back seat. Nobody's buckled up. Like it was like, I gotta tell you, we didn't do it very often, and we never did it if we had to go onto a main road. If it was just like back roads, we'd be fine. But it was a lot of like adjusting because you're in a different culture. It has different norms, and it's so normal. Like nobody has car seats there. They look at you like, you want to put that in my cab? That doesn't even go in my cab. And so we recognize like the rental cars were good. We could get the car seats in on the latch systems there, but the taxis, like I think we had one taxi that was able to get latches, and the rest of them we just kind of had to roll with it.
I
So
think I
it was.
remember seeing one of your stories and I thought about it. I was like, oh yeah, car seats. Like you traveling with car seats. I know I had a girlfriend who traveled to somewhere else and they ended up using golf carts the whole time. And so they didn't even, same idea. They brought a car seat and they're like, what are you supposed to do with that? And so it's bringing out like, especially when you have young children, is to look into that. So would you still travel with your car seats? Because of course, like for us, like safety is really important for our kids. Or would you just adapt to the other countries that are not, yeah, that are not using the car seat?
If I'm going to rent a car, bring the car seats. Because
Yeah.
when we got outside of the city, the car rentals only ended up being about $45 a day.
Mm,
Which I mean, when you're there for 2 months, is that like $2,500, $3,000 that you really want to spend? And especially because we're like a big fan of slow living, we don't leave very often. So it would have been sitting there for nothing. And then to get a car for one day is really challenging. So, like, if we were to rent a car long term, yes, but if we're taking cabs, like I didn't know that car seats, like there are no seat belts. So what do? You can't even attach them.
yeah.
You don't really even get a choice. That's the crazy thing. Is like you don't get, that was what stressed me out, is I didn't get to make the choice. And we
Mm.
could have just stayed home the whole time, but you're balancing that. Like, there's a main highway in Panama, and my thing was, I will not go on the highway. Too cars are going too fast, but if we're going, like, down a side street, like, to the zoo, which was 6 minutes away, I'm okay with that. Like, that I can wrap my brain around because the other option is not experiencing Panama, and that's why we went, right? It's
Yeah.
hard. It's really hard. It never felt good about any of it, I will say.
Well, and it's those norms as well. Like we're so used to like the safety and having the car seats, and then yeah, new country, new customs, new way of people doing things. So yeah, it shifts things a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so what's next? I know you guys are home now, and you talked about in September to head over. It's the island, I believe, right? You're heading over to the island, and
Yeah.
then Spain. Did you? Oh no, Spain for next
Dominican and then
Dominican. Sorry.
potentially somewhere in
Yeah.
Europe for yeah. Yeah. So I mean, the everything's kind of wide open right now. We're in this space where like we have we have a good friend and he has an entire business built around a specific type of investing. And so we've kind of like locked on to what he's doing now. And it's one of those things that's opening up our brain. And Flynn and I are literally like, I had no idea this existed. Like, how do you go your whole life and like all this stuff exists? So we're like 6 days in at this point of learning this world and deciding what we're going to do. But the potential it has is like, we're starting to look at like, we got to wipe everything off and put what we want back on again. Like the whole world could change as we know it again. And like, do we want to continue living here? Do we want to go move somewhere with more park space? Like we're in that really uncomfortable vision is changing stage. And I think
Mhm.
like we all go through it at different points. It doesn't have to be at this like level when you're contemplating where you want to work and where you want to live. But like even when you're imagining a new vision of yourself getting healthier, for example, it is so uncomfortable going through it. And I was talking to a client about this the other day. Like when we first learned how to invest, period, we were petrified. We would put $100 in, watch it like a hawk. It goes up $2, down $2, up $3, down $5, terrified. Learning new software, learning new language. Like we didn't have a clue what we were doing. And what I always tell people that are interested in like learning a new skill, like if you want to do investing, if that's your vehicle you want to get out with, you have to look at it as being willing to take on that discomfort. And I liken it to like I did 6 years in my undergrad. And I went through all of that effort because the goal was originally to be a physiotherapist. And my goal was if I make it to be I'm going to do 6 years and then I'm going to go and do my physiotherapy's master's. And that's another 2 years, 8 years of school to make 80 grand a year. So think about that for a sec. I was willing to invest 8 years of my life in exchange for 80 grand a year. We exchanged 6 months of intense learning for our life. And right now, our monthly dividend payments are 85,000 a year. We're at 6,800 a month. And we don't work for that. That just happens,
And
whether the
it's
market
mind
goes
blowing.
up
Yeah.
or down. And I always say, like, you look at this world and you're like, what is a covered call? What is Questrade as a platform? How do I do this? What do I click? Like it's so overwhelming that the idea of having to figure it out makes you just want to throw the towel in. But we have now learned, like we look at this whole world of passive income investing and it's like breathing. It's so common to us, this language. Like I was talking to a client and she was a photographer. And I said, you pick up that camera, you know what to set the shutter speed to, how to adjust the aperture, the focal length. I don't know what these words are. My husband uses them. He owns cameras. And I said, and it's an extension of you. And when you are working, you not sitting there thinking, it needs to be brighter. What button do I press? You just do it. And that is because she's proficient at it. And I said, the same thing happens when you dedicate to learning. Now, if you dedicated any amount of time to earn the income you have right now, if you dedicated any amount of time to school, this deserves at least twice the effort. And know that you are going to run into things and you're going to be like, I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know what they're talking about. I need Google as like a dictionary on the side. And I'm going to watch it again. There's a video Flynn and I watched in this training we're going through. We watched it 4 times in a row and we have Google open. I'm like, I don't know what that word he just used was. We're Googling it 4 times before we understood a 5-minute video. And like, we're willing to get that uncomfortable because we have been through a quantum leap before, going from where we were to where we are now. And it was just as uncomfortable then, but look where we are now. So I'm like, hell yeah. I'm not It's not scary anymore. It's exciting. When I can't figure it out, I'm like, this is going to be like breathing one day. And I get so excited about this discomfort because I know what's coming. It's going to be great. It's going to be
Well,
great.
it's funny that because I'm always saying to my clients, right? Like, if you don't feel uncomfortable, you're not playing a big enough game because their brains ultimately are wired to keep them the same and familiar. So if you're super comfortable, it's like it's maybe time that you get to stretch a little bit and lean to that uncomfort zone. And I think so many of us, when we feel that discomfort, it can be off putting, but you're just leaning into that and you're shifting, right? Excitement, anxiety, same, right? Same
Experience,
neurochemicals that
experience.
are coming out of you, right? So yeah, lead into that discomfort, get curious, level up. And I love it. Like, I'm so excited for our trip to Vancouver. I'm like, oh yeah, it's a couple months away, but I can't wait to sit down with you guys and just be in person and get together and just learn and absorb everything that you guys have learned over the last couple of years. And yeah, I mean, just you took yourself on, right? And you shifted the questions you're asking and you're experimenting and you are leaning into the life and vision that well, not, I mean, you're creating it, you're living it, you're creating it, and you're open and you're shifting. And I mean, I love it because, and I think we actually said this when we first met. Sometimes I feel like there's not a lot of people like us around. And it's so exciting when you connect with somebody and they're going through the things with you and you know that you have someone to go through it with. And so through the communities that you're part of, through the couple that you met and the families that you got to meet in Panama and all the families that you still get to meet, like I mean, the world has opened up to you and your family in a totally different way. And it's exciting, right? Like, as you said,
Yeah.
it's so exciting. And for all the listeners today, like, I I just love for you to think about for yourselves, like, where do you get to go to create excitement? What is something that lights you up that you want to learn more about? And yeah, I'm curious, Tanessa, if you have, I always like in interviews, like asking like sort of an action item or something that you'd love to sort of inspire the listener with to go and take action on after today's episode.
I have a thought and then maybe an action. And my thought came up while you were just talking. Life is a live document.
Mm,
Like it's not a book, it's not a chapter, it's not a story, it's a live document, meaning it's in transition, it's in progress, it's growing at all times. Like you are constantly writing that. And so maybe actually the action is into that. It's if I wiped everything off the table, what would I want to be spending my time doing? And I asked a client that a couple of weeks ago, and he said to me, he goes, Tessa, you're just so far ahead that I can't relate to that. I said, yeah,
mm.
but this was 3 years ago for me that I had no idea this even existed. So don't let hearing a story like this be like, that must be nice for her. How nice. That's not for us. We could never do that. This was not in my realm of awareness 3 years ago. Flynn was working a full time job. I was working 30, 40 hours a week. We were in a townhouse that had not enough bedrooms for the amount of family. We couldn't figure out how to get a house that had the bedrooms for me to have an office. I was working in my kitchen. Like this wasn't in the awareness. And so I said to him, I was like, do not let that thought of it must be nice. That's not relatable. That couldn't be for me. Stop you from setting the vision. Because if you don't even conceive of what you could want, you guarantee yourself never to get there. So maybe the action would be wipe everything off the table. How would your business actually look? How would your life actually look? How do you want to feel on a regular basis? Don't
Mm.
look at anybody else's goals. Don't look at my story. Like, do you genuinely, like a lot of people wouldn't want to sit on a beach for 8 weeks. They'd find that boring. I love it. Like, what do you want your life to be like? And then know that it's okay if it doesn't look like that right now. And then every week you ask yourself, what do I need to do to get a step closer? And that's how it happens. And I think by, like we talked about, reticular activating system, you put that out there, you start seeing things like I said, we were ready for the leap. And that channel's YouTube video came across my feed and I just happened to click on it. Like if I had not been looking for that, I would have scrolled past it. You got to be ready. And you can't be ready if you don't know what you're ready for.
So there's something else I was going to add there. And I mean, something as you were speaking, because it was something that I heard from a mentor a few months back, was like immerse yourself, right?
Yes.
So if you're interested in, let's say, going to Panama and that's in your vision at some point, immerse yourself, right?
Mhm.
Start to learn about Panama, start to join groups about Panama. Like you get to, it's training the brain that you've already created the thing that you want to create, because your brain doesn't know the difference between what's right in front of you and the vision you're creating, right? It's something I said earlier. You are the creator of your thoughts, and your thoughts create your reality, and you get to shift that as in it's already happened. And Tanessa, I know that you created that scene, I think it was episode 87, where you talked about being in the kitchen and having the music playing, the feet in the sand. Like this is this. I mean, Tess and I both do this work and we know the power of it. And so that's why it's just, I love the invitation of just asking yourself, like, what is it you want to create? How do you get to feel it? Like, how will you feel in this moment? Connect with the five senses. You know,
Mhm.
when you're, and it is back, I'm going to use the Panama example because you did so beautiful in that recording. So, number 87, if you haven't listened to it yet, I invite you to go listen to it. But really, Tanasa talked about the things that she would hear, which was the sound of the music, the smell of the food that she was cooking, the taste of the food that she was cooking, you know, her feet in the sand on the floor, the floor in the house that she was renting in the Airbnb. Oh God Almighty, like what she was seeing. Like really go into that. And that's what the power of the brain is when it comes, when you create that crystal clear picture of what you want to experience, you're showing your brain that's already taking place. And then immerse yourself. Surround yourself by people who are aligned with the vision you want to create, those goals, and just continue to ask questions and be curious and create that vision and that life you want to create.
I love it. Couldn't have said it better. Go after it, you guys. This is for you. I promise. Whatever you want is for you. And that's not woo woo. I know what it's like to be on the other end of that and be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. They all say that once they're there, but like you, this is how you start. You can start today. Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thanks for having me, Tanessa, as your takeover podcast host today.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'll make sure if you want to connect with Alex Leanne, I'll make sure I'll leave all links to her podcast and her Instagram and all the things below so that you can go say hi. And I'm also going to link, gosh, how long ago did we do this episode on my podcast now? Like, how long were you a
Oh,
guest, do you think?
I want to say it was 2 to 3 years ago. I think I was your very first
You
interview.
were. I'm looking it up. Episode 26,
Yeah.
Neurohacking for High Achievers with Alex Leanne Carter. It's going
Yeah.
to be linked in the description. Go listen to that and then go find her. She's in our world, everybody. If you're listening to this, we're in the same world here. It's great. So good. Well, thank you so much for being such a wonderful takeover host. I loved this idea. Thank you for offering that opportunity. And I hope it was valuable if you're listening to this and it just maybe gave you a little spark of inspiration to get going. So I will talk to you guys next week. Have a beautiful week. Bye.
Bye.